I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and when I was about 3 years old, we moved out to a farming community called Orland Park, which was about 40 miles out of the city, and basically rural area. So I was around agriculture, machinery, and equipment, and farms all my upbringing as a kid. And being that I was living in the country, driving vehicles and cars, trucks, farm equipment, you started doing that when you were a young guy, 13, 14 years old, you were running machinery and all. So that's how I kind of got exposed to getting involved in the mechanical part of things and having an interest in being a technician or a mechanic to try to make repairs. And because you had to do that, you'd be working on the field and the tractor or something would break, you had to fix it, you were out there by yourself. So you kind of learned to be handy.
Did they have like a mechanical program in your grade school or high school?
No, my high school did not offer it. We had industrial arts, but it was mainly wood shop and metal. Plastics was coming on back then. This was in the early 60s when I was in high school, so plastics was kind of coming along. But there was no automotive program in the school that I was at. Well, initially when I got out of high school, I wanted to go into the military, but I couldn't because I had high blood pressure, of all things, being a young kid, and the military wouldn't take me. So I ended up going to work with the National Park Service. I worked on a survey crew. I was stationed in Death Valley, California, and then Yellowstone and Yosemite. But I always had a longing to be a nut and bolt guy. I always wanted to be a tech. When making a repair or working on equipment and someone would ask me a question on how that piece functioned or worked or whatever, I had an ability to relate it, convey the information in a format that people could understand. That was, I didn't get into all the complex things. I could put it into the terminology that they could understand. And they always said, boy, I understand. Now I got an understanding of what you're talking about or how this particular system works and how it functions. So I kind of had an ability to do that. So I went to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois, that had what they called Vocational Technical Institute, which was changed. It was a 2-year associate's program that was changed into the 4-year university. And they had automotive technology program, and that's where I had my formal training, if you will. I got my associate's degree through Southern Illinois University. And then I went in and started working towards my bachelor's degree, but I was self-paid for my education because we didn't have the money for, it was 5 kids in the family and my parents couldn't afford to send us to school, so the only way we got through was pay on your own, and I just ran out of money. So I went into the industry and started working as a technician. Went and worked in a shop, and that wasn't easy back then because you're a greenhorn, they don't want to hire you. And I did get into a gasoline station, and I was pumping gas and doing oil changes, and then they let me do more things, started to change starters and generators and alternators. I'm dating myself now, generators, but started doing that type of work, light work. And then just proceeded in the industry, doing more involved repairs, standard stuff, front end work, brake work, a lot of exhaust back in the day when we had lead fuel, and so exhaust systems didn't last. And did a lot of top end work, because the valves would get all full of deposits from the lead fuel and all. So there was a lot of engine work to do back in the day. Not like today, the engines are pretty durable for a long time before they have to be taken down. Yeah, so I did lots of top end. I did a lot of valve jobs, did a lot of timing chains, water pump, and of course the old trick in the shops. What we do is we used to pour water down the carburetor, which that's another thing you talk about carburetors. A lot of guys don't know that. My grandson, he's he never worked on a carburetor in his life. He knows fuel injection and distributorless ignition and all, but you talk just points in ignition, they don't point ignition. It's a foreign language to them, and carburetors. And I'd always tell a joke about quadrajet carburetors is how do you tell when the float's bad on a quadrajet is when you step on the shop floor and gas squishes out of it, it's bad because they had that composite float in the carburetor that would saturate the fuel and would always cause flooding. It was a real common problem on the quadrajet carburetor. So what we do, getting back to your first question about how'd you get that buildup out, is we used to pour water down the carburetor. had to be real ladylike when you did that. You'd just create steam, and it would break that carbon up in the intake valve. It looked like a yard fogger behind the car, you know, because it looked like you had a blown head gasket, all that white smoke coming out. And you had to be real careful, because if you poured that glass too fast, then you would be like on an AC compressor. If you try to liquid charge a bottom load compressor, then you got rods hanging out the block. So you could ruin your day if you weren't careful. But I was always drawn to the aspects of electrical, fuel systems, drivability. They call it drivability now. It used to be tune-up in the old days. And air conditioning. Air conditioning was kind of one of those systems that nobody really wanted to touch. You would come in the shop, and people were kind of afraid of it. They didn't know they were dealing with pressure, and didn't really understand a lot of the physics behind it. How can you have a substance that boils and makes cold air? That didn't make sense to a lot of the old techs that I would be around, and even some of the younger guys. So I would always try to draw those jobs. And then I got involved with hang-on air. So this is in the early 70s, when factory air was still pretty few and far between. It was mainly the high-end vehicles that had factory air. So for the mom and pop grocery getters, and all the companies started to come out to develop the hang-on system, where you'd have the box under the dash. And so I did a lot of installation of hang-on air. Also worked on the factory air as well, the old EPR systems that Chrysler had, and the POA systems that GM had, and SDV on Ford and so forth. So it was just an exposure to all the different systems and or types of systems that were there and present at the time. And it just kind of stayed with me. So I always worked. Anytime I took opportunity to go into different repair shops, I would always be the guy that would go. I'd say, well, I can do AC. And they go, oh, wow, you can work on AC. And one of the questions they used to ask is, well, can you change the shaft seal in an A6 compressor? So back in the day when we had the big A6 compressors, put a ceramic seal in was kind of a challenge for a lot of guys. And I could do it pretty handily. So I always had lots of AC work to do. First job I had as an instructor is I was at high school in Crete, Illinois, Crete Monee High School, and they were looking for. They had an ad in the newspaper. I think my wife saw it and just said, because I was always frustrated, because I liked being a wrench guy, but I liked the aspect of teaching. It was just something kind of, I had that, that teaching gene or whatever was in me to do this, to want to pursue that. Even though when I was in school, I was frightened of public speaking. I mean, I was terrified to do public speaking. And then, of course, in training, you're in front of people all the time, and you have to, you're under the spotlight there, and you have to make sure you don't, mess up or whatever. But you're kind of exposed under those situations. But anyways, they had an ad looking for someone to teach auto shop, and so I applied, and they hired me. And it was a typical high school situation where we were under-equipped. We didn't have any of the tools and equipment that we needed. We had an old 413, Dodge engine in there, and just an old Hunter Vision-liner, light aligner they called it back then, and the old tire balancer that you had the 220 motor on, you'd spin the tire up with it, and just bits and pieces. So I went to work for Sun Electric Corporation, and they were looking for a zone representative, which was a sales job. But the way they sold it to me is they said, well, if you work as a Sun rep, you're also going to do training. And you're going to sell equipment, you're going to set it up, and you're going to train the techs how to use the equipment. So what put the bite in me was the training. So I took the job. I moved from Illinois to Beaumont, Texas, and became a zone representative for Sun. Well, once I got on board, then the veil was lifted, and it was a sales job. And they were on my back for the numbers, because I was the type of guy, I would go into a repair shop, and if I could fix this old scope and get it to work, then guys loved me, but I didn't sell anything. But this machine was working, and so I wasn't selling the new equipment. I was supposed to be in there and saying, hey, we're gonna, you got to get the latest and greatest. Whereas I would try to fix their old machine and let them get by another year with it. So I wasn't really sales material. So I wound up going to work for one of my customers. called Carburetor and Electrical Repair in Beaumont. And they just specialized in carbureting. I did a lot of carburetor rebuilding. I used to specialize in Holley carburetor. A lot of guys didn't want to fool with Holley carburetors, but I was pretty good at fixing those. And then we did tune-up and then air conditioning and electrical. I did a lot of electrical troubleshooting and repair, shorts under the dash and all that, and rewiring dashes and all. And then, of course, working on air conditioning. In that part of the country, you got AC almost year-round down there, because AC was, when I lived up north, the air conditioning pretty well shut off when kids were getting ready to go back to school towards the end of summer. The kids had to have shoes to go to school and forget the AC winter's coming, so it would kind of come to a halt. But down there, it was pretty busy with AC up until you got to the holiday time around. From November through January, it was pretty slow. But other than that, we had work. So I worked there, and then went, like everything else, I had an opportunity to make more money at another shop. So I went to work for another repair shop in Beaumont, and then I was there for about a year, and then they made me the shop foreman. And we had 7 techs, and then of course, then in that position, I had to deal with health problems and customers and the owner. So it was a lot of headaches, but good learning curve. You learned how to think on your feet, dealing with irate customers and all that. And then your help, wheeling the toolbox out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with a Pinto transmission scattered all over the floor, and then you'd have to go and put it all together because the customer's coming at 5 o'clock. So that was pretty interesting times. But so I did that. And then from there I left and I moved back north. I was a good Yankee. I went back north and I didn't stay down. I stayed there for 5 years. We were there for 5 years in Texas. And then we moved back up to the Chicago area. And I went to work. There was an ad in the paper and they were looking for a training instructor for AC at a company called Everco. And I went to work for Everco in Lincolnwood, Illinois. Kind of going back on my time that I had with Sun Electric and having the Sun van with all the equipment on board and all that, and going out to set up the equipment and demonstrating the equipment. I sold the company on the idea of having tech reps, guys that would actually just do training on our product line. And prior to that, what they were doing, they had the sales reps that would be selling, and then they would do AC clinics in the evening. So they'd be selling during the day, and then a few nights a week they would do AC classes. So I said, hey, why don't we just come up with guys that are just dedicated to training only, and they'll be our troubleshooter on our product line, and just focus on the nut and bolt part that let the sales guys sell. That's what they do best. And so the company bought the concept. And it started out with 1 tech van, and we grew it to 15 vans. And that was from 1981 till 1987. And then we got bought by Moog Automotive in St. Louis, chassis company. They're a suspension company, but that was the era when everybody was buying out various companies. So they moved me to St. Louis, and we expanded our tech van fleet. We went from our 15 tech vans to eventually having 35 tech vans. And we diversified the training. We had the temperature control training, we kept that. Then we added steering and suspension training, and then eventually brake training to that, because we became part of Cooper Industries, and they owned Wagner Brake. So we kind of had a tech rep with 3-cornered hat, if you will. We were doing AC and suspension and brakes. Everco, 1926, and they got into air conditioning early in the 50s. They used to be called Everhot. If you talk to old techs, most of them are underground now, the old bridge, but if you ever mentioned Everhot, they knew that was Everco. And then when they got involved with air conditioning in the late 60s, they began to move into air conditioning. They went from they had Everhot and Evercool, and then they became Everco. That's how their name change took place. The way it went down is in 87, Everco became part of Moog. We maintained our branded name. In 1991, Moog, which was now part of Cooper Industries, bought Murray Corporation. So Murray became part of the group. So then we became the temp control division of Moog Industries. Move Automotive, and that was the temp control division. And that included the Murray guys, and so all the Napa reps and all that were put under that umbrella. And then our main competition back then was Four Seasons. So what took place in 1998, I believe it was, Cooper Industries and Standard had a meeting, and what Cooper Industries wanted, they wanted the ice brake division, which was owned by Standard Motor Products, owned ice brakes. And they wanted to bring that division in to be part of the Wagner brake. They kind of wanted to go more under car than under hood, even though they owned Champion spark plugs, but they wanted to get out of the temperature control. So what they did is they did an asset swap between Standard and Cooper Industries. So the Everco Murray piece became part of Four Seasons. So that's how I became involved with Four Seasons. So in 1998, I was released from Moog, and I was hired by the Napa division, they're the belt and hose guys that work for Napa, which were Standard employees that worked for Standard Motor Company. They became the AC guys, and so on the Napa side, so they did belt and hose and air conditioning, temp control for Napa. So they brought me in to train all of these sales guys to learn the AC line. So I worked with Standard from 1998 through 2006 for Standard Motor Products. At that point, I went to work with I went to work for Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. I worked as an adjunct professor with and did AC training for them at the university. And then I had an opportunity to go to work for Freightliner Truck. So in 2007, I went to work for Freightliner through the College of Southern Idaho. They had the subcontract from Freightliner, and I did training for Ryder and for Penske. And I taught the box truck, which is the M2 business class truck, as they call it. And I taught the electronics and the AC system on those trucks from 2007 through 2010. And then in 2010, I got laid off because truck sales got soft, so they let me go. And then I did work for MACS. I wrote your two textbooks, the one on electrical and the one on the AC systems. I did that for Elvis. So that's what I did. Plus I did MACS classes and did some other freelance stuff in 2010. And then 2011, Freightliner brought me back. And then they started having me doing training on the Class 8 Cascadia road track. So I taught mainly electronics and AC on that. And a little bit on the engine, but they had trainers from Detroit Diesel that did the engine part of it. But truck techs always have questions about the fuel systems and all on the trucks, that's always a hot button with them. So engine management. So I did that up until 2017, and then I retired December of 2017. And then I'm just like freelancing, doing a lot of stuff for MACS, and then if I have other opportunities, I do that as well. Yeah. So, but mainly trying to keep close to home because I was on the road most of my working career, and I want to be close. I got twin grandsons coming in April, and I want to be around to help my daughter out because she's got an 18-month-old son now, and so she's going to have her hands full. Well, that's how I always try to format. I always try to look at things. The way I always have done my training is I've always tried to look at it from the side of the guy sitting, the guy that's on the line. I try to embellish the program for what he's dealing with. So, I say, this is the situation that you're going to run into. You're going to see this, and the guys go, they understand because they're seeing it. That they see the problems. And that's why I like the way Peter does it too, because you can see he's seeing problems that they're seeing, and so it's those are the type of things that people like to see. So that's the way I always looked at it. I always look at the training from the viewpoint of what the guy put his butt in a chair and it worked 10 hours before he came to your class was dealing with. He doesn't want to hear all this fluff and, the big formulas and stuff like that. They want to know, hey, I'm working on this truck or this car and I've got this situation that's coming in and I got this knocked under the hood and I think it's the AC that's doing it, but a lot of times it could be a motor mount or something. That's you're just giving them information, tangible stuff that they can take back and apply in the bay. So that's always been my style. I've tried to always approach it from the standpoint of I'm one of you guys. I'm not high and mighty, know-it-all, because I'm not. When they hired me at Everco, I was just a training instructor, and then they made me training supervisor because I worked with one other gentleman. Then they put me kind of over him. And then as we expanded and started our tech van program, then it made me director of training. So I became a director of training for Everco. And MACS, this is back in 1981, and MACS was soliciting manufacturers for seed money and to become kind of sponsors and help get MACS launched, because Simon Hulahojian was getting the program going back then. He was spinning off from IMACA, I believe, and they were starting MACS as a standalone. So I've been involved from the get-go. I was down at the Shamrock Hotel in Houston, Texas, at the first meeting they had down there, and so I was, just because I worked for Everco, a supplier, and you had Four Seasons, and Murray was there, and you had a lot of hang-on, Frost Temp, you had Jet Air, and all these other companies. At the time, back in the early 80s, you had all kinds of companies that were involved with air conditioning, making AC parts. So there was a big contingency of people that showed up. So so I've been around MACS since 1981. So I've just kind of stayed the course when Simon was there. Art Meyer, he had an AC business when I lived in Detroit, up on Prospect and 10 Mile. And I used to buy engine kits from them and put hang-on air conditioning on. So I kind of, this is before I even knew anything about MACS. This was back in the 70s when I was doing the AC stuff, doing the installations. So, Art Meyer was part of the group, and then you had Classic Tool was part of it, Cy Herman and Bob Lamb. I don't know if those names ring a bell, but they were there. Yeah, and Bob Witt was part of the group, from Ford. And I was there with the founding fathers, and I also was involved with an organization called Automotive Training Managers Council, ATMC. I think they're still around. And then there was a kind of a duplicate company called an organization called Technical Training Council, which was part of MEMA. So Motor Equipment Manufacturers Association. MEMA was the main organization that backed Technical Training Council, and at ATMC was backed by Asia, which is now whatever the Big I show is out in Las Vegas every year. They don't call it Asia anymore. I forget the new name for it. But you always have in the first part of November, you go to Las Vegas to you got SEMA out there, and then you've got Apex. They call it Apex now. But anyways, so I was involved with both of those organizations. And and I also was with ASC. I did a lot of test question writing with ASC. And I got the Blue Seal of Excellence from ASC for my involvement with them. I did it on air conditioning, and I got involved with some, I forget which one it was, but they always had me there for the A7, And we'd always go around and around, and there was a guy, Jim, I can see him, Irish guy. Jim, he worked for Toyota, and we were writing test questions for orifice tube systems. And Jim went, "Oh, we can't put those in." He said, "Well, my Toyota guys are going to see an orifice tube. All I got is TXVs on it." The guy said, "Well, don't you have a used car department?" Don't tell me they're not seeing one. But we'd butt heads, about that. And it was kind of interesting to do. But I was there back when the old guys were there. I guess they're either dead or gone now. But anyways, I've just been in the industry too long. That's what it amounts to. So basically, I just seen a lot of the changes that have taken place and all this stuff that's just grown up. Seen a lot of these organizations get absorbed and changed, like we talked about Asia becoming Apex, and Technical Training Council going away and so forth. I always tell guys, I says, if they didn't need the spec, it costs a lot of money for manufacturers to write all these specs and procedure books. If they didn't have to do it, they wouldn't. They'd save a lot of money. So they do it for a reason. That's why you have to follow the process of doing it right. Well, I think two things I think in the heavy duty arena that may come to pass. First, a factor is going to be cost on the refrigerant before they want to make the switch, because of the fact that you're looking at the bigger capacity. Even if you downsize the capacity in a truck, it's still going to be particularly with a sleeper, you're going to see a lot more refrigerant required. Like right now, you look at average sleeper, it's about 3 3/4 pounds on a sleeper. Could be 4 pounds on some trucks. So you're still going to see that number. Even if it comes down, it's going to still be around the 3-pound mark probably for a sleeper. So if you're looking at retail of $100 a pound on it, that's $300 for the refrigerant. You're going to get a lot of pushback on that from the operators of the trucks. So I think if we continue to see the cost drop on YF, they may pursue that. I know there's also talk about going possibly with the R152A system. I know there's some studies being done there. No, I don't, believe it or not. You know, a lot of guys in the industry, they got a drag car. When I was a kid, I used to drag race. I had my brother and I we had a couple of road runners that we would drag. And then I had a Javelin of all things, a Rambler, a 68 Javelin that I souped up, and should have left it alone stock. It'd be worth more money if I'd have kept it, but I, put a big cam in it and all that, and did some dragging with it, and I traded for a motorcycle from a guy who wanted to swap. I got a Honda, what the heck was it, a 550 Honda, 4-cylinder Honda back in the 70s, and then he took the Javelin. But no, I like HO trains, I like train sets, and I'm going to get one going for my grandsons, so. Then I like stargazing, and I like to bird watch. So those are my kind of outlets that I like to do. And I'm kind of a museum nut. Like when I was on the road and I'd go work with the sales guys, I'd want to go to a museum. I'd say, why don't you take me to a museum or something? I'd like to do that stuff.